On Sunday, October 5, 2003, around noon, Timothy Treadwell made a satellite phone call from the untamed wilds of Alaska to Malibu, California. For 13 summers, he had immersed himself in the rugged beauty of the bear sanctuary, a place where he felt a profound connection with the grizzlies he so passionately sought to protect. The following day, the serenity of this remote wilderness was shattered. Willie Fulton, the pilot who had become familiar with Treadwell's routine, arrived at the camp only to find it eerily deserted, save for a formidable brown grizzly. Local park rangers soon stumbled upon a gruesome scene: the dismembered remains of Treadwell and his girlfriend, Amie Huguenard, scattered near their mangled tents. The sanctuary had transformed into a scene of horror. 2 bears, including a massive old male tagged Bear 141, were killed during the retrieval of the bodies. A necropsy revealed human remains within the stomach of the larger bear. This marked the first known instance of a bear killing a human in Katmai National Park. Timothy Treadwell's journey from an ordinary American grappling with addiction to a dedicated and controversial conservationist ended in the most tragic and ironic way imaginable. Despite his fervent advocacy and deep connection to the grizzlies, the very creatures he devoted his life to ultimately led to his demise. This is the haunting tale of a man who sought to bridge the gap between humans and nature, only to become a victim of its most primal force. Timothy Treadwell, born Timothy William Dexter on April 29, 1957, was one of 5 children born to Carol Ann Dexter. His father, Val Dexter, worked as a construction foreman in Long Island, New York, and the family was solidly all-American and middle class. Growing up, Timothy was a normal kid who loved animals, kept a pet squirrel named Willie, and became the star diver of his high school swim team, eventually winning an athletic scholarship from Bradley University. At college, Timothy's life took a turn for the worse when he got in with a bad crowd and started drinking. After hurting his back and losing his scholarship, he headed to California at age 19 to try to become an actor. Though he managed to get bit parts on a few TV shows, he had a difficult time landing a recurring role. When he lost out to Woody Harrelson for the character of Woody Boyd in Cheers, he was devastated and turned to alcohol and drugs for comfort. He had a few rough years, hanging out with lowlifes and working for minimum wage jobs while he looked for a new direction. He reinvented himself and took on new identities, first posing as a British orphan, then saying that he hailed from Australia as he affected an Australian accent. With his shaggy blonde hair and tanned surfer's body, he looked apart. During this time, he started using the last name Treadwell, which he adopted from his mother's side of the family. In 1987, Timothy legally changed his surname and became Timothy Treadwell. In his book, Among Grizzlies, Living with Wild Bears in Alaska, Timothy writes that in the late 1980s, after overdosing on cocaine and heroin, his friend Terry Tabor convinced him to clean up and go on a bear-watching trip to Alaska. To prepare for his trip, Timothy spent months saving money and reading everything he could find out about the area. The next summer, he set out on his motorcycle and headed north. The journey was life-changing. After Timothy encountered a wild bear up close, he came to believe that he was called to protect these creatures and devote his life to their care. He gave up drugs and alcohol for good and committed himself to a rigorous schedule of living among the grizzlies on the Big Green, their open-area habitat in Katmai National Park. To document his adventures, he took along a Minolta point-and-shoot camera and a professional quality camcorder, eventually capturing over 100 hours of footage, in addition to perhaps thousands of photographs. Timothy called the open area of bear grass he camped in Grizzly Sanctuary. He refused to take along weapons, bear spray, or electric fencing to protect himself from them, and instead tried to ingratiate himself into their territory. At times, he got physically close to the bears he spent time with and perhaps took undue risks camping in the Grizzly Maze, an area of thick underbrush crossed by bear trails. Perhaps to establish an affinity with the animals and make them less fearsome, he took to giving them human-like nicknames like Mr. Chocolate, Warren, and Dahlia. In his book and his video footage, Timothy acknowledges his fear and awe for the bears. He treats them with respect, yet he also seems to have an insatiable desire to form a bond with them and share something in common. While Timothy claimed that all of his dealings with the bears were appropriate and meaningful, many people in the area believe that any relationship of trust that he thought he developed was wishful thinking or even delusional. Still, Timothy did spend time with many of the same bears summer after summer without causing or experiencing any lasting harm. Every year in late summer, Timothy would follow the bears into an area of thick brush he called the grizzly maze. As Timothy documented the bears' activities, he integrated himself into their lives, making himself the star of the show, blurring the distance between the observer and the observed. During his first years in the Big Green, biologist Vic Barnes, a brown bear researcher for the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge, met Timothy in Carluke Lake on Kodiak Island. In a Los Angeles Times article titled Man, Martyr, Myth, dated December 14, 2003, Barnes recalls that he came in a skiff. He's got on shorts and hiking boots. He jumped out in 2 feet of 50-degree water. I asked him, "Why aren't you wearing hip boots?" He said, "That's the way the bears do it." Barnes noted that rather than take on the detached air of a scientist who would normally try to go unnoticed, Timothy would often act like a bear by splashing in the Alaskan waters and crouching on all fours. Barnes continued, "I think he really wished he could be a bear. It made no sense what he was doing otherwise. It was contrary to any sort of research." From a scientist's point of view, interacting with bears directly negates the value of research into their behavior because it changes the way they react. By approaching the grizzlies, living among them, and letting them touch him or lick his hand, Timothy was crossing a line. Barnes felt Timothy's actions were foolhardy and self-serving, but Timothy was stubborn and convinced he was doing the right thing. Certainly, Timothy Treadwell's methods were unconventional, yet he clearly had a way with animals. In Werner Herzog's 2005 documentary Grizzly Man, we see Timothy in action through his own video footage. As Timothy narrates the scene, we can see the bears doing bear things. Usually, they amble through the grass, minding their own business. Sometimes, though, the camera captures events that are frightening and spectacular, like a violent clash between the bears he calls Sergeant Brown and Mickey, who met on the beach and fight over a potential mate. Timothy's enthusiasm is pure and naive. Little foxes run alongside him, follow him playfully, and sit by his side as he scratches their heads between their ears. Sometimes the scenes are idyllic, and sometimes they seem filled with danger. Many times they read the story of Timothy's own attempts to overcome the fear and distance between himself and the bears and try to achieve an impossible dream, an understanding with bears that no one else had. As the years went by, Timothy seemed to be inventing himself and crafting his own public persona through his videos, many times with great success. He faces the camera in a cohesive wardrobe of dark, monochromatic, and sometimes camouflaged gear that meshes well with his outdoor setting. His manner is open, friendly, enthusiastic, and direct. Sometimes, however, Timothy comes across as overexcited, immature, and even unstable.
Animals rule. Timothy conquered.
In another clip, Timothy says, "I will die for these animals.
I will die for these animals. I will die for these animals."
Perhaps never imagining how horrible his end would be. Timothy presented himself as a lone crusader, protecting the bears against poachers and other dangers on his own. In fact, he made friends with, or at least got to know, other naturalists and shop owners in the area. And through the years, he brought his girlfriends along on his adventures. Amie Huguenard spent time with him in Alaska over the last 3 summers of their lives. Long before dating Amie, Timothy had become friends with and sometimes dated a woman in Malibu, California, named Jewel Polovic, who helped him create and run their activist organization, Grizzly People, which its website defines as a grassroots organization dedicated to preserving grizzly bears, their habitat, and a harmonious relationship with humankind. Jewel was instrumental in helping Timothy secure funding for his expeditions, conducting outreach, and helping him write his book, which was published by HarperCollins. They remained close throughout his lifetime. Though Timothy could be quirky and stubborn and lacked a scientific education, he was charming, smart, and disciplined enough to make long-term alliances that would help him pursue his cause. He also, to some degree, achieved the celebrity he had missed out on as an actor in the 1990s, when, as per the LA Times, he appeared on The Tonight Show with David Letterman, Rosie O'Donnell's show Rosie, and Dateline, and became friendly with Leonardo DiCaprio and Pierce Brosnan. By 2001, Treadwell had become a well-known environmental activist. He spent a great deal of time traveling throughout the United States, holding seminars and visiting elementary schools free of charge to teach kids about bears. He worked with other naturalists, scientists, and activists. The front piece of his book, labeled Scientific Credits, acknowledges the knowledge that academics and biologists, including Dr. James Halfpenny at Colorado State University and Larry Allmiller at the Alaskan Department of Fish and Game, gave him over the years. Timothy also spent time with Charlie Russell. Charlie was a naturalist who studied, raised, and lived with bears in Kamchatka, Russia. He criticized Timothy's obstinate refusal to take safety precautions on his journeys, yet he respected his devotion and skill in staying alive, saying, if Timothy had spent those 13 years killing bears and guiding others to do the same, eventually being killed by one, he would have been remembered in Alaska with great admiration. Timothy Treadwell was, by no means, universally loved or respected by the public, the scientific community, or the National Park Service. In his zeal to rid the area of poachers, he destroyed some of his friendships by fabricating stories that hurt those who had helped him, and caused a scandal when he intimated that a published photograph of a shotgun-carrying guy named Joe Allen was in fact a poacher. In fact, according to Butch Thompson, another pilot who knew Timothy, there was very little, if any, poaching in the area where he stayed, saying that Timothy knew darn good and well that Allen wasn't a poacher, but he had to get the hype up. Timothy eventually apologized, but he ruined some of his friendships for good. Timothy's attitude towards the bears also didn't sit well with people who believed in keeping the animals at a distance. Many locals felt that his efforts were damaging and self-serving, and that Timothy didn't have sufficient understanding or respect for the bear's wild nature. Research ecologist Tom Smith, who worked with the Alaska Science Center of the U.S. Geological Survey, said that Timothy was breaking every park rule that there was in terms of distance to the bears, harassing wildlife and interfering with natural processes. Right off the bat, his personal mission was at odds with the Park Service. He had been warned repeatedly. He believed that Timothy's death was tragic but unsurprising. Many others have called Timothy an idiot, self-aggrandizing, and stupid. His reactive and combative personality made him an easy target, and many locals perceived him to be arrogant and careless rather than brave or courageous. In Grizzly Man, Sam Egley, a pilot who helped recover Timothy's body after his death, said, "To me, he was acting like he was working with people wearing bear costumes out there, instead of wild animals." He continued, "Those bears are big and ferocious, and they come equipped to kill you and eat you, and that's just what Treadwell was asking for. He got what he deserved." In some ways, it's likely that the horrible deaths of Timothy Treadwell and Amie Huguenard were due to stress, bad luck, and an uncharacteristic lapse in judgment. Despite Timothy's gregarious attitude and propensity for taking risks, his longtime friend Kathleen Parker says that Timothy generally planned out his trips and exercised caution when scheduling his activities. Others said he had matured over the years and he was more mellow and better able to get along with people. Besides that, if Timothy had been incompetent, he wouldn't have survived without injury for 13 years. Many people felt that even if Timothy was eccentric, he had proven himself. Timothy was a very poor young man when he started this, she says, but also very methodical. He never went out at the end of the season, especially when he had everything put away. That was a little strange. Timothy and Amie were ending their annual stay at the end of the summer season when the grizzlies went into hibernation. Timothy had, in fact, already visited Kodiak Island on September 26th to store his gear at Kathleen's place and catch a flight back with Amie to California. But he had an argument with a ticket agent over the price of his return flight. At the last minute, Timothy and Amie decided to return to their campsite for one more week, a decision that would seal their fate. According to the LA Times, when pilot Dean Andrew took the couple to Keflia on September 30th, he was surprised that they were going back. They said something like, "We didn't say our proper goodbyes to the bears," he remembered. That's all they said. It was a little unusual. It was unusual that he'd go against his plan. By the time Timothy and Amie got back to camp, there were very few bears to be seen. However, it was a dangerous time because food for any remaining predators was scarce. Sometime between October 5th and October 6, 2003, it seems likely that Timothy and Amie were attacked by an aggressive bear who had not gone into hibernation and was desperately looking for food. They were at their campsite and may have even been preparing to record a video for the day because somehow they managed to capture an audio recording of the horrible incident. Though the lens cap remained on the camera, the 6-minute tape captured the couple's voices and screams as a grizzly mauled them. At some point, Timothy encouraged Amie to run for her life and cried out, When pilot Willie Fulton and park rangers discovered the site of the attack, the scene was a horror show. The bear had torn Timothy and Amie to pieces as he killed them. When rangers recovered part of Timothy's right arm and hand near his campsite, his wristwatch was still attached. His disfigured head was found a short distance away, and Amie's remains were found by the tents. After locating and killing the bear that killed the explorers, the rangers found human clothes and body parts, including fingers, inside the bear's stomach. The savagery of Timothy Treadwell's death must have been something he never fully believed could happen, and it was particularly tragic given his love of the bears and the horrible death of his girlfriend Amie. The ugliness and brutality of their end shocked the public and seemed to negate any romantic notion that Timothy had ever had a special understanding or a relationship with the bears he so lovingly named. Some say Timothy Treadwell was a childish, troubled, and misguided fool, but others take a more measured and compassionate view. Werner Herzog, for example, appreciated Timothy's enthusiasm and his gifts as a filmmaker, though he disagreed with his view on nature. As horrible as his end was, Timothy Treadwell died as he lived out his passion, and he accomplished his goal of drawing attention to and creating sympathy for the lives of grizzly bears.